All right. So today we're going to be diving into a really cool verse from the Bhaja Govindam,
Awesome.
verse 25. And we're going to be focusing on this idea of like realizing the divinity within, according to Advaita Vedanta philosophy.
Right.
And we're going to be using Adi Shankaracharya's commentary to help unpack all this. So
Nice.
what do you think is like the most fascinating part of this verse?
Well, I think what's really interesting is that it jumps right in, you know?
Yeah.
It tackles this idea of oneness head on, and it starts right off the bat, you know, that first line.
Yeah, it says, "You, Vishnu, are the same everywhere in me and in others."
Right.
And I know that Vishnu represents the supreme consciousness, Brahman, but how can Vishnu be in everything and everyone?
Yeah.
Doesn't that contradict the idea of like individual souls?
That's where Advaita Vedanta gets really interesting, because it suggests that what we think of as individual souls are ultimately expressions of that one indivisible Brahman.
Okay.
So think of it like the ocean. The waves may appear separate, right?
Right.
But they're all part of that same underlying water.
So are you saying that there's no real distinction between me and you and like that tree outside my window?
Yeah.
We're all just waves in the ocean of Brahman?
Precisely. And it's a pretty radical idea when you think about it.
Yeah.
Like, if we really believe this, how differently would we treat each other? How would we treat the planet?
Right.
You know, it has a lot of implications.
Yeah, and it makes the next line even more confusing because it says, "You become angry in vain, being intolerant towards me."
Right.
So if Vishnu representing this unified consciousness is everywhere, then why is there anger at all?
That's a great question. And that kind of gets to the whole concept of avidya, or ignorance, in Advaita Vedanta. And Shankaracharya argues that anger, and really all negative emotions, they all stem from this ignorance of our true nature.
So we get angry because we're clinging to this limited sense of self, this me, that feels separate and threatened by the other.
It's like being angry at a wave for crashing on the shore when it's just the ocean doing what it does.
It's a futile reaction when you see the bigger picture.
Exactly.
This makes me think about all those times I've been frustrated with people, seeing them as separate and annoying. What if I tried to see them as expressions of the same divine energy? Would I even be capable of getting angry then?
Now, that's a question that Advaita Vedanta encourages us to really contemplate.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't necessarily offer like easy answers.
Right.
But it gives us a framework for understanding like where our suffering comes from and the possibility of moving beyond it.
Okay, so if anger comes from this sense of separation, then how do we cultivate the opposite? How do we cultivate that vision of unity?
Well, the third line of the verse gives us a clue. It says, "You are the same everywhere with an equal mind towards all."
Okay.
And this is pointing to the concept of samadarshan, which is equal vision. The idea that the divine, or Brahman, doesn't have preferences or biases.
Okay.
Sees everything and everyone with that same impartial eye.
I get it, like, conceptually.
Yeah.
But honestly, like, seeing everyone with equal vision,
Right.
that feels really challenging. I mean, there are people out there doing terrible things.
Right.
How can we reconcile that idea with the very real pain and suffering that exists in the world?
That's a question that's challenged spiritual seekers for centuries.
Yeah.
And I don't think Advaita Vedanta shies away from, you know, the complexities of human experience. It acknowledges that from our limited perspective, duality and suffering and even evil seem very real.
But it's asking us to look deeper
Exactly.
beyond those surface appearances.
To see that even amidst those apparent contradictions, there's an underlying unity, a divine spark present in everything and everyone.
Okay.
And to try to cultivate that vision of oneness even when it's difficult.
Yeah. And that brings us to the final line of this verse.
Yes, it does.
Which feels like a call to action.
It is.
What does it say?
It says, if you desire for a long time the realization of your divinity as Vishnu.
Okay.
It suggests that realizing this oneness, this divinity within, requires effort,
Okay.
longing, persistent desire.
It's not something that just happens passively.
No, it's an active pursuit.
So it's not enough to just intellectually understand these concepts.
Right.
You have to really want it. You have to yearn for it with your whole being.
Exactly. And Advaita Vedanta offers a number of different paths,
Okay.
both knowledge-oriented and devotion-oriented, to help us cultivate this longing and move towards that realization.
I'm really curious about those paths.
Yeah.
But I think maybe we need to take a moment to process all this incredible wisdom.
Yeah.
This first line alone has sparked so many questions for me.
That's a great idea. Let's pause here and give our listeners a chance to digest these profound ideas. And when we come back, we'll explore those specific practices and techniques that Advaita Vedanta offers for cultivating this longing for realization.
Sounds good. So we were talking about how, Vishnu is present everywhere, even within us.
Yeah.
But the verse also mentioned Vishnu getting angry.
Right.
And I'm trying to wrap my head around that. Like, how does that fit in with this whole idea of oneness and the divine being beyond emotions?
Yeah, it's a subtle but important point.
Okay.
So while Advaita Vedanta says that Brahman is ultimately beyond all duality, including emotions like anger, it also acknowledges that, our human experience is different.
Right. So are you saying that from the ultimate perspective, there's no anger?
Right.
But from our limited human perspective, it exists?
Yeah, like the sun doesn't change whether it's behind clouds or shining brightly.
Okay.
Brahman's nature stays the same.
Right.
But our perception of it is kind of colored by our limitations.
So by our avidya.
Exactly.
But it still makes me wonder, can we truly see everyone with equal vision? Yeah.
As the verse suggests. How do we reconcile that with the reality that some people cause real harm and suffering in the world?
Yeah. And again, I don't think Advaita Vedanta gives easy answers to that.
Right.
But it does encourage us to kind of distinguish between actions and the underlying essence of individuals.
So we can condemn harmful actions without condemning the individual's inherent divinity.
Exactly. Imagine a diamond that's covered in mud.
Oh.
The mud doesn't change the value of the diamond, right? It's still a diamond.
Yeah.
And similarly, negative actions might cloud our perception of someone, but they don't change the divine spark that's within them.
That's a really helpful analogy.
Yeah.
But this whole emphasis on, desiring for a long time, the realization of our divinity as Vishnu.
Yeah.
It makes me think that this is a pretty challenging process.
It is.
So are there specific practices that can help us cultivate this longing?
Absolutely. Advaita Vedanta offers a ton of practice.
But they can be broadly categorized as knowledge-oriented,
Okay.
which is jnana yoga, and devotion-oriented, which is bhakti yoga.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit.
Sure.
What does jnana yoga involve?
So jnana yoga emphasizes self-inquiry
Okay.
and the study of scriptures to gain a deeper intellectual understanding of these concepts.
So it's about using our minds to dismantle the illusion of separation and recognize our true nature.
Exactly. It involves questioning our assumptions, examining our beliefs, contemplating the nature of reality. There's this classic jnana yoga practice called neti neti.
Okay.
And it's basically meditating on the statement, not this negating everything that we are not until we arrive at our true self.
That sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, it can be.
What about bhakti yoga?
So bhakti yoga focuses on cultivating love and devotion for the divine. So it's about engaging our hearts and emotions, surrendering to something larger than ourselves.
So this could be chanting mantras or singing devotional songs or even just spending time in nature feeling a sense of awe and wonder.
Absolutely. It's about finding those practices that really speak to you personally and help you cultivate that feeling of love and connection.
So it sounds like both jnana yoga and bhakti yoga are working towards the same goal, but from different angles.
Yeah, you could say that they're like two wings of a bird, both necessary for flight.
Okay.
So jnana yoga provides the understanding, and bhakti yoga fuels the yearning, and the emotional drive to realize that understanding.
This makes me think about all those times that I've tried to force myself to be more spiritual by focusing on meditation or intellectual understanding. But maybe I've been neglecting that heart connection.
It's a common struggle.
Yeah.
Especially in our modern world where we prioritize the intellect.
Right.
But both paths are valuable.
Okay.
And ultimately they complement each other.
So are you saying the best approach is to find a balance?
I think so.
Okay.
Between the two.
And that balance might look different for each person.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The key is to find the practices that resonate with you, that help you cultivate both intellectual clarity and heartfelt devotion.
I can see how this could be a lifelong journey of exploration and discovery.
For sure.
What about for those of us who are just starting out, though? What's a practical first step we can take to cultivate this longing for realization?
I think a simple but powerful practice is to start paying attention to those moments in your daily life where you feel a sense of connection, peace, or joy. It could be appreciating the beauty of a sunset, feeling gratitude for a kind gesture, experiencing a moment of deep connection with another person.
So it's about noticing those like glimpses of something greater that's already present in our lives.
Exactly. Those moments are like signposts, pointing us towards our true nature. And by paying attention to them, savoring them, and reflecting on what evokes those feelings, we could start to cultivate that longing for something more, for that ultimate realization of oneness.
This makes me think about how we often get so caught up in chasing external things. Like we think happiness lies in achievements or possessions. But what if true fulfillment comes from cultivating this inner connection, this awareness of our inherent divinity?
That's a profound insight.
Yeah.
And that's what Advaita Vedanta encourages us to explore. It's not about denying the world or rejecting material things, but it's about shifting our focus. Recognizing that true, lasting happiness comes from within, from realizing our oneness with the divine.
This has been an incredible conversation.
Yeah, it has.
I feel so inspired by these concepts.
I'm glad.
It's like we've been given a whole new toolkit for navigating life's challenges and finding deeper meaning. But maybe we should let our listeners absorb everything we've covered so far.
Let's pause here, and when we come back, we can delve into some specific examples of how these Advaita Vedanta concepts can be applied to our everyday lives.
Sounds great. Welcome back. We've been like really diving deep into this idea of realizing our divinity within. And we've talked about how Advaita Vedanta encourages us to kind of look beyond that illusion of separation and cultivate this vision of oneness.
And we talked about some practical ways to do that.
Right, through Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga.
Exactly.
But I'm wondering, how do we actually apply these concepts to our everyday lives? Like, it's easy to get caught up in the intellectual understanding, but how do we translate that into tangible actions and changes?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's important to remember that Advaita Vedanta isn't just a philosophy to be studied. It's a way of life to be lived. And I think one way to bridge that gap between theory and practice is to look at our relationships.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So we've been talking about seeing everyone as expressions of the divine. How does that change how we interact with the people in our lives?
Well, think about a time when you felt frustrated or angry with someone. Maybe they did something that hurt you, or maybe they just got on your nerves. And ask yourself, what if I saw this person as a reflection of myself, as another expression of that same divine consciousness?
Wow. It's like extending that ocean analogy to our relationships. Instead of seeing separate waves clashing, we see the ocean interacting with itself.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean that we condone harmful actions or ignore boundaries. It's about recognizing that underlying unity, even as we acknowledge the diversity of individual expressions.
It makes me think about forgiveness. If we truly believe in this interconnectedness, does that make it easier to let go of resentment?
I think so.
And offer forgiveness both to others and to ourselves?
Forgiveness becomes less about condoning actions and more about recognizing the shared humanity, the shared divinity between us and the person who's wronged us. It's about freeing ourselves from the chains of anger and resentment.
We're choosing to see the diamond even when it's covered in mud.
Exactly.
And this concept of oneness doesn't just apply to our relationships with other people, it extends to our relationship with the planet as well.
Absolutely. If we truly believe that Vishnu or Brahman is present in everything, that includes all of nature.
The trees, the rivers, the animals. And when we recognize that interconnectedness, it changes how we act.
Absolutely.
Protecting the environment isn't just about saving the planet. It's about honoring the divine in all its forms.
Exactly.
It makes those verses about Vishnu being everywhere take on a whole new meaning.
I think so.
It's not just a poetic metaphor. It's a call to see the divine in every aspect of our lives.
And to act accordingly.
Okay, so we've talked about relationships and our connection to nature. But how does Advaita Vedanta apply to our own personal growth and the challenges we face?
Well, one of the core teachings of Advaita Vedanta is that the root of our suffering lies in this belief in separation.
Okay.
in identifying with the ego with that limited sense of self.
Right, like we talked about earlier, how anger and negative emotions stem from avidya, from that ignorance of our true nature.
Exactly. So from an Advaita Vedanta perspective, personal growth involves recognizing those ego-driven patterns, those thoughts and behaviors that keep us trapped in this cycle of suffering.
So it's about becoming more aware of those patterns, those moments when we're reacting from a place of fear or insecurity or judgment.
Exactly. And practices like mindfulness and meditation can be so helpful in cultivating that awareness.
So as we cultivate that awareness, do those patterns just magically disappear?
It's not always a quick fix, but as we become more mindful, we create space between ourselves and those habitual reactions. We start to see them as temporary fluctuations in this vast ocean of consciousness.
Like those waves we talked about.
Yes.
They might rise and crash.
Right.
But the ocean remains undisturbed beneath the surface.
Beautifully put. And that undisturbed ocean represents our true nature, that pure awareness that's always present, even amidst the storms of life.
And are those moments of deep peace and joy that we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Are those glimpses of our true nature?
I think so. Those moments are like cracks in the facade of separation.
Okay.
Allowing the light of our true nature to shine through. And by cultivating those moments, by remembering them, we nourish that longing for realization, for that ultimate experience of unity.
This has been such a rich and thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
We've explored so many layers of Advaita Vedanta, from the philosophical foundations to the practical applications in our relationships and connection to nature. And even our own personal growth.
And it all points back to this one idea. You are not separate. You are not limited. You are a manifestation of that same divine consciousness that pervades all things.
What a powerful message to carry with us, as we navigate the complexities of life.
Absolutely.
So to our listeners out there, we encourage you to really contemplate this idea of oneness. See how it resonates with your own experiences and explore those practices that help you cultivate a deeper sense of connection, both within yourself and with the world around you.
And remember, as the Bhaja Govindam says, realizing this divinity within is a matter of desire, of longing, of persistent effort. But the rewards are immeasurable. A life filled with greater peace, purpose, and joy.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking the truth that lies within.